These are the two hottest handhelds out right now, but after spending weeks with both, only one really fits how I play. So, I spent the last couple of weeks living with the Nintendo Switch, and I mean really living with it. There were nights where I should have been sleeping, but instead I was crouched over in bed, locked into one more run. I've walked around the house with it in hand, totally zoned out from the real world, and I played more rounds of local multiplayer with my girlfriend than I can count. Though, to be honest, she's beaten me about 90% of the time. And after all that time, one thing has become super clear to me. How good the Switch 2 feels completely depends on how you use it. As a handheld, honestly, it's great, it's fun, lightweight, and comfortable. This is where it shines. But when you dock it and play it like a traditional console, that's where things fall apart a bit. It doesn't really compete with something like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X in that living room console kind of way. It just doesn't give you the same high-end experience, and that's okay because it's not trying to. But that's exactly why today I want to compare it to another handheld that's still a hot commodity, the Steam Deck OLED. It's been out for a little while now, and while it didn't just drop, it stayed in the spotlight for good reason. It's powerful, it's versatile, and it's become the go-to handheld for a lot of gamers who want a more open, PC-like experience on the go. So the question is, with Nintendo pushing their hybrid console further than ever, has the Switch 2 finally caught up to the deck, or are these two handhelds aiming at totally different things? Let's break it down. Starting with how the controller feels, it's the very first thing you notice when you pick these up. When it comes to handheld gaming, portability and form factor matter just as much as specs. It's not just about how powerful a device is, it's about how easy it is to grab, take with you, and actually want to play outside of a usual setup. Right away, the Steam Deck OLED and Nintendo Switch 2 take very different approaches, and you feel that difference the second they're in your hands. The Switch 2 is noticeably lighter and thinner, it's sleek, easy to carry, and naturally fits into everyday life. It doesn't demand any special planning, it's just easy. That's one of the Switch 2's biggest advantages over the Steam Deck OLED, pure convenience. Trying to fit the deck into a travel bag takes effort. It's big, it eats up space, and you have to think about how you're packing it. The Switch 2, way more forgiving. It slips into tighter spaces, and honestly, if you're brave enough to raw dog it without a case, which yeah, I probably shouldn't be doing, you save even more room. The Steam Deck OLED is molded into your hands, deep grips, curved edges, it just locks in. Whether you're lying on the couch or sitting at a desk, it feels right. Your fingers rest naturally on the triggers, your thumbs fall into place, and that ergonomic shape reduces fatigue during long sessions. The Switch 2, while super portable, doesn't offer the same in-hand feel. It's flat, it's compact, which is great for throwing in your bag, but after a while, especially in longer play sessions, your hands start to do more work. It's that feeling of holding a tablet rather than a controller. A grip case would definitely help here, but out of the box, it's not the most comfortable for extended use. Now, let's talk about the controls, because this is where things start to pull apart. The Steam Deck OLED gives you a full set of modern inputs. The analog sticks are full size and responsive, the analog triggers have proper travel, perfect for driving games, shooters, or anything where nuance matters. The face buttons feel clicky and firm, and on top of that, you get two trackpads with haptic feedback that mimic a mouse click, which is generally useful for navigating SteamOS or playing strategy games. Plus, there are 4 rear paddles that you can fully map to anything you want. It's that kind of setup that feels customizable and built for serious play. The Switch 2, on the other hand, keeps things light and modular, but at the cost of depth. The Joy-Cons are small and honestly still feel way nubbier than I was hoping for. The analog sticks have barely any travel or resistance, which makes precise movement, especially in shooters, feel off. And here's something that's generally disappointing. Nintendo is still using the same joystick tech that caused the drift issues on the original Switch. Oh yeah, that's a problem. The new magnetic Joy-Con attachment does feel more secure. It's a noticeable improvement over the older rails, but the inputs themselves still don't feel as solid or satisfying as you get on the deck. And while using each Joy-Con as a mini controller is great in theory, let's be honest, they're more of a party trick than something you actually rely on for regular gaming. Nintendo did add a new feature this time called mouse control, where you can slide the Joy-Cons across the table and move a cursor, kind of like a big clunky trackpad. It's interesting, but it only works in one game, the Welcome Tour, which costs about $15. And outside of that, this feature just kind of sits there. Now for connectivity, let's start with the Switch 2. On the handheld, you've got a USB-C port on the bottom for charging and docking, a headphone jack up top, a game card slot, and a microSD card slot tucked behind the kickstand for expandable storage. Wireless connectivity has finally caught up. The Switch 2 supports Wi-Fi 6. You also get Bluetooth support, which is great for wireless headphones and controllers. The dock this time around brings some real improvement. It includes one USB-C port, 2 USB-A ports, 1 HDMI port, and 1 Ethernet port. Now over to the Steam Deck OLED, and this is where it pulls ahead in sheer flexibility. There's a single USB-C port on the top, but it's powerful. It handles charging, data, video output, external drives, and anything else you want to throw at it. It supports DisplayPort over USB-C, meaning you can hook it up to monitors or TVs without fuss. There's also a 3.5mm headphone jack, and of course a microSD slot for expanding your storage. The big upgrade here is wireless. The OLED model supports Wi-Fi 6E, meaning faster speeds, lower latency. For gamers downloading massive Steam libraries or using remote play, this makes a noticeable difference. You also get Bluetooth 5.3, which means better compatibility with modern wireless headphones and lower latency connections for controllers and accessories. One thing to note, the deck doesn't have an Ethernet port built in. If you want to hardwire it, you'll need a dock or a USB-C hub, but once you do, it becomes a full-blown desktop setup. Multiple USB ports, Ethernet, HDMI, or DisplayPort out. Whatever you need, it's all possible with the right dock. For the display, both the Steam Deck OLED and the Nintendo Switch 2 made big improvements over their previous versions, but in completely different ways. So while they might seem similar at a glance, the way you see it when you're actually playing it is pretty different. Let's start with the Steam Deck OLED, and right off the bat, this screen is gorgeous. It's a 7.4-inch HDR OLED display with a resolution of 1280 by 800 and a 90Hz refresh rate. What really stands out is the contrast and color. Because it's OLED, blacks are black, not gray, not washed out, just pure inky black. That makes everything pop. The color saturation is vibrant without being overdone, and HDR support just gives everything more depth. You also get a fast refresh rate at 90Hz, which makes navigating menus, scrolling, and gameplay animations feel smoother than traditional 60Hz panels. And let's not forget, the screen is slightly larger and thinner compared to the original deck, with smaller bezels, so it feels more modern and immersive overall. Now, switching to the Switch 2, the display here is a 7.9-inch 1080p LCD panel, and honestly, it looks really good. This is Nintendo's first handheld with a 1080 screen, and it makes a huge difference compared to the original Switch's 720 display. And yes, it supports HDR10 and goes up to 120Hz with VRR, which is huge for Nintendo. That kind of feature set used to be reserved for high-end TVs, not something you see on a hybrid console. It's also a wider aspect ratio, so you get a bit more screen real estate overall, and the screen is noticeably brighter than previous Switches, which helps a ton when you're gaming in daylight or on the go. But being real here, it's still an LCD panel, so while it's sharp and bright, it doesn't have that same deep black level or contrast that the Deck OLEDs bring. When you're playing darker games or something with heavy shadows, you do start to see the limitations of LCD tech. Colors don't feel quite as rich, and dark scenes can look slightly washed out in comparison. But what I will say is that while I was playing Cyberpunk 2077 on the Switch compared to the Steam Deck, it kind of looks a bit better, but I don't know, you guys fought me on this one. So we talked about hardware, let's get into the real difference maker, the operating system and game library, because specs are great, but what you actually get to play and how you access those games is what really matters day to day. Let's start with the Steam Deck OLED, which runs SteamOS. From the moment you boot it up, it feels like a PC wrapped in a console shell. It's fast, responsive, and built around your Steam library. If you already own a bunch of games on Steam, they're just there. Verified games show up cleanly, controller navigation feels smooth, and cloud saves sync automatically across devices. And for anyone who wants more control, SteamOS opens that up. You can jump into desktop mode and use it like a Linux PC, install third-party launchers like Epic, GOG, Battle.net, download emulators, mods, tweak performance, remap buttons all natively. Now, switching over to the Nintendo Switch 2, this is where things get simple. It's clean, you turn it on, and you're greeted with that familiar icon-based Nintendo UI. No clutter, no launches, just your games, your saves, and your settings. It's made for ease, and for the most part, it nails it. Game loads are fast, sleep mode works seamlessly, and the system UI never really gets in your way. But let's be real, the biggest selling point of the Switch, and still the case for the Switch 2, is Nintendo's exclusives. And here's the kicker, Nintendo games are still expensive. There's no wait for sale strategy here. Even older titles, ones that came out 6 years ago, are still sitting at $60 plus. So if you're buying into the ecosystem now, get ready to pay that premium Nintendo tax. And while you do get access to your old library through backward compatibility, many upgraded games come with a price tag. Not all of them are free updates, so even longtime fans may find themselves rebuying titles just to get that performance bump. Now let's get into the internals, the actual specs and hardware that power both of these devices. And yeah, these numbers matter, but what's more important is how they feel when you're actually gaming on them. Let's start with the performance starts, the chipset. The Steam Deck OLED is running a custom AMD APU that combines a Zen 2 base CPU with RDNA 2 graphics. It's basically a mini gaming PC in your hands. The Switch 2 on the other hand is powered by a custom NVIDIA chip. It's got ray tracing cores, tensor cores for DLSS, and it's honestly a big leap over the original Switch in terms of GPU power. The Steam Deck still pulls ahead in raw power. The deck pushes out around 1.6 Tflops, while the Switch 2 in handheld mode lands close to 1.7, but gets boosted to around 3.1 when docked thanks to DLSS and clock scaling. So if you're playing on the go, they're surprisingly close, but in docked mode, Nintendo gets a pretty significant performance bump, at least visually. When it comes to RAM, the deck has the edge. It comes with 16GB of LPDDR5, which is huge for a handheld. It really helps with multitasking, background processes, and demanding games. The Switch 2 has 12GB of LPDDR5, which is a nice upgrade from its predecessor. And while it's fast, you don't quite get the same breathing room as on the deck when you're pushing heavier titles or using larger games with dynamic assets. Storage-wise, both give you decent baseline options. The Switch 2 comes with 256GB and it's expandable via microSD Express. The Steam Deck OLED, depending on the model, gives you up to 1TB of NVMe SSD, and it's using high-speed PCIe storage. You also get a microSD slot here too, but the deck's internal drive is straight up faster and can handle larger games with shorter load time. Now let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077. This is one of those games that demands a lot from the hardware. Big open world, dense city environments, dynamic lighting. It's kind of the title that really shows you what a device is capable of. So naturally you had to test it side by side in both the Steam Deck OLED and the Switch 2. Let's start with the deck. On the Steam Deck OLED, I ran Cyberpunk at 720p with medium settings, FSR 2.1 enabled, and capped it at 45Hz using the built-in performance tools. The result? A really smooth experience. It looked sharp thanks to the OLED contrast, lighting felt dynamic, and I was pulling around 40 to 45 FPS consistently in most areas. The best part is, you can tweak it. The deck gives you full control and that OLED screen absolutely makes Night City pop. Neon lights, reflections, dark corners, it all just hits harder when you got those deep blacks and rich colors. Now over on the Switch 2, yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 actually runs. It's clearly running at dynamic 720p in handheld mode with aggressive DLSS upscaling and some very clear asset compression. Performance-wise, it is said to be hovering around 30 FPS, but not always stable. Frame pacing stutters happen during busy scenes, and draw distance can be pretty limited, but it's playable. And if you're someone who just wants to explore Night City on the go without the expectation of high fidelity, it's doable. Where it really fell short though was in visual clarity. In darker environments, the LCD on the Switch 2 just doesn't do it justice. Blacks turn to gray, the contrast isn't there, and you lose a lot of the atmospheric tension the game relies on. Battery life is one of those things that sounds simple, but in practice, it totally shapes how you use a handheld. Are you constantly checking your battery icon? Can you make it through a flight? Or do you feel confident heading out without a charger? Let's talk about how the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck OLED handle this. Now, battery is a little tricky to compare, but here's the gist. Steam Deck OLED has a 50 watt/hour battery. In real world use, this translates to anywhere between 3 to 12 hours of playtime, but that's a big range. So here's what it actually looks like. Drop it down to a game like Cyberpunk at 45 FPS, and suddenly you're seeing between 2 hours and 2 hours and a half. Now, on paper, the Switch 2 runs a 5220 mAh battery, which sounds decent, but specs don't always tell the full story. So I wanted to really put it to the test because out of everything about this console, I honestly think battery life is one of the most important things for casual players. So here's what I did. I booted up Mario Kart World, cranked up the brightness to max, threw on a timer, and just played. And I kid you not, it gave me a little over 2 hours before the battery hit zero. And honestly, that's about what I expected. Mario Kart may look like a clean, colorful Nintendo game that doesn't take a lot of power, but it's doing a lot under the hood. It's a super well optimized game, but it's not lightweight. You got real physics, effects, online connectivity. It chews through power just like any high-end title would. So for people who are planning longer gaming sessions, especially when you're out and about, you'll need to keep a USB-C power bank nearby. The Switch doesn't have fast charging either, so once it dies, you're waiting close to 3 hours to get a full charge. Alright, so we talked about specs, display, sound, battery life, portability, and real-world performance, and after spending serious time with both, here's where I land. The Nintendo Switch 2 is still the most Nintendo console ever made. It's slick, light, easy to pick up and play, and gives you access to a lineup of games you really can't find anywhere else. If you're someone who just wants to game casually, dive into Nintendo's big hitters, and enjoy a clean, no-fuss experience, the Switch 2 delivers that really well, but it also plays it safe. You're locked into their ecosystem, their pricing, and for now, not a ton of new exclusive to really push the system forward. The Steam Deck OLED, on the other hand, feels like the total opposite in the best way. It's a powerhouse. It gives you real control over your experience, whether that's tweaking performance, diving into AAA games, emulating older consoles, or building your own massive portable library. It's not as compact, and yeah, it takes a bit more effort to get the most out of it, but if you're a gamer who wants freedom, versatility, and power in your hands, is generally hard to beat. So it really comes down to this. If you want polish, portability, and Mario Kart right now, the Switch 2 is its pick. But if you want flexibility, full control, and a portable gaming PC with zero limits, the Steam Deck OLED is in another league. Both are great, they just serve completely different types of players. Let me know which one you'd pick in the comments, or if you're lucky enough to have both, what you're using each of them for. Drop a like if this helped you decide, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive comparisons like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.